Hi, everybody. As you can see on the screen, we have our guest, Lin-Liu, joining us already, and welcome. This is our WildChina's 86th virtual event, and I'm Zhang Mei, founder of WildChina. A bit on the personal news side, when we first started these virtual series, my son was just applying to college. And today I just came back from dropping him off at Haverford College in Philadelphia. That's where things were a little bit sort of disorienting. I hope you understand. Now, I share that personal thing, but partially because it's going to impact our session today a little on the tail end. We'll cut it short by 5 minutes. But also when I look at it, how fast time flies. And I am extremely, extremely grateful to have the support of my team and have the company of all the audience and have the guests so graciously sharing their time. So thank you, Jen. So this month,
you're welcome. You're very welcome.
This month, our monthly book club, we read this book, Serve the People, A Stir-Fried Journey Through China by Lin-Liu. And initially, I wasn't so sure of what to expect, whether this is a travel memoir or a cookbook. And then I opened up the first page. It's this charming mix of a personal journey into cooking and also exploration of just very common people, common Chinese people's lives, which is very insightful. So if you have the chance, do get a copy of this book. And there's also a list of wonderful recipes. So as Jen said, all you need to try these recipes is a cleaver and a wok. So yes, anyway, right. It sounds so simple, but actually when you get started, when you read the book, I realized how much effort that was. A little bit about background of Jen. Jen was born in Chicago, raised in Southern California, and went to Columbia for her bachelor's and master's degree. And then she went to China for the first time in 2000 as a Fulbright fellow and continued on in Beijing and Shanghai as a journalist. She's authored 2 books. We're reading one of them, Serve the People, Stir-Fried Journey Through China. And the other one is called On the Road from Beijing to Rome.
On the Noodle Road, sorry.
On the Noodle Road, I'm so sorry. Thank you for correcting me. And she has also written numerous articles for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, Travel and Leisure, many, many others, right? And for those of us who lived in Beijing, everyone knows also the Black Sesame Kitchen, which Jen founded. And the Black Sesame Kitchen is really, it's a Beijing institution. It's sort of tucked away in this very hard to find alleyways in old Beijing. And honestly, finding it is part of the fun. You sort of like go in between bicycles and old ladies in their PJs fanning themselves in the alleyways. And eventually you get to this beautiful courtyard space where they have a communal table and you have delicious food and you're watching the chefs cooking right in front of you. So it's a very immersive, inclusive kind of experience. And hopefully we'll get to talk about that a little bit as well. And I know later on, Jen left China, went to Cuba for a couple of years, but now she is back in Beijing building her second restaurant. And we hopefully will hear more about that as well. And logistics today, as usual, Jen will talk about her writing and her journey to food for about 20 minutes. And then we'll open up to Q&A again. So thank you for joining me. And Jen, it's wonderful to have you here. I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm actually standing in my kitchen. Because I felt like since I write about food, I should share a few tips about how I go about cooking in my own kitchen. I have to say I don't actually cook too much at home. I save that for my time. It's kind of a secret of a lot of people in the food and beverage industry that they don't actually cook at home so much because you're doing it for work all the time. But in any case, I just wanted to share this because this is actually where I also do my online cooking classes. So every now and then I since COVID started, I've been doing online classes, kind of teaching to the world, usually like an hour class where everyone gets together and cooks. So I'm kind of used to this environment. So I'll just show you what my wok looks like. This is my wok. Probably many of you guys have a good wok at home. A lot of people ask me, how do you choose a good one? And I would say that you want something that you can hold, that's not too heavy, but also not too light. Some woks tend to be either super light or super heavy. So something in the middle. And, this is a really basic brand, Medea in China. You can get this on Taobao, or probably, the international version of, I think they have like Taobao Pals, or May probably has ideas of where you can get this stuff. So I like the one handle system. Like, I don't like the two handles, like the two little bunny ears, because generally your wok gets very hot. And so it's very hard to handle anyway. So those aren't really handy, and you would need sort of a towel to hold that. So I like one handle here, and just something that you can kind of use to, kind of toss and have one hand on. And generally we use a ladle like this. So the ladle is kind of the other essential item when you have a wok, because this helps you stir. And then in terms of sauces, I'll show you my cleaver. So this is the cleaver, and I recommend something like this as well. We hold it generally like this. And something that also not too heavy, not too light, and this is kind of intimidating, even like as I'm holding it here, it looks probably pretty scary. I find that these knives, I've never had a problem. I've never hurt myself. I've cut myself multiple times with Western knives, with, serrated knives, but because you have a good amount of weight and you're always keeping your other hand right behind the cleaver like this, it's actually very safe. So those are a couple of my essential items, and we can talk a little bit more about that. If you join my classes, you'll see as I come by here all of my amazing sauces and spices, and I could spend a whole other session talking about those. So I will actually just pop into my living room here, so we can just sit down and have a coffee and talk. Let's see. So did you want me to just go ahead and do a little talk, or do you want it more like a conversation, May?
Go ahead and give us some of our audience obviously read your book, and Kitty said, love the book, and some book hasn't quite arrived yet. Mine got here just in time. So I read the whole thing. But tell us, what got you on the food journey, particularly. I think it would be interesting for our audience, for both you and me, being Chinese in the Chinese family, being a cook. Oh my God. It's like, are you kidding me? Columbia educated.
Yeah.
And we were speaking to Fuchsia as well, Cambridge graduate. Oh my God. Yeah. How sort of your family reacted to your journey to cooking, and what took you on these various journeys?
Yeah. So I had started in China just on a Fulbright fellowship. I came here after I finished journalism school at Columbia. And, this is the year 2000. It was very exciting to be in China then. I mean, it still is, but in a different way. I just delved in like every possible topic you could imagine. Like, as you said, wrote for every newspaper and magazine I could find. I eventually worked with our very good friend, Lin-Liu, at Newsweek magazine as one of her correspondents. Melinda's still here, and I see her all the time, and she's become like a godmother to our children. So it's just lovely. But anyways, so I, at a certain point, after a few years of just, kind of traveling almost through every province in China and reporting on social issues and econ and politics and architecture and anything you can imagine, I just got really tired of not focusing on one thing. Like you can, it's just, there's just too much to really explore in China to really feel like an expert unless you really do focus on one area. And for me, I had just moved to Shanghai at the time, and it was a really exciting time there because the Bund was being revitalized. All these, restaurateurs from overseas were coming to open fancy restaurants, and there was Shanghai has always been like every other place in China almost, a place about food and street food, and just there's always like a buzz around talking about food. So I just decided that, well, I had written an article for Newsweek actually about these prominent chefs coming, like Jean-Georges, Nobu, coming to China to open restaurants. And I thought, well, this is really a topic that interests me, that food. It's something that unites people rather than divide. And it's something that is a great way of getting into China that's not intimidating, So that's how it all started for me. And then I started, writing about food almost exclusively. I became a food critic here in Beijing. I moved to Beijing. I became a food critic for Time Out. And then I really thought, well, if I'm going to write about food, I really need to learn how to cook. So that's how it just began. I went to a local cooking school in the Hutongs. Back then there weren't outlets like WildChina had started already, but there weren't any cooking schools that really aimed at foreigners until basically Black Sesame Kitchen opened, and a couple of others around the time of the Olympics. So back then, and it was just a great way of getting to know China because I just enrolled in a local vocational school that I had found online through, a Baidu search. I think Baidu existed back then. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Yes.
Sohu, maybe Sohu or something like that. Anyways, so I went to a local cooking school, and then I wrote about those experiences and served the people. So just about finding that place. About the experience of, the theoretical cooking that went on, not the practical cooking at that school, because all of the students were basically recent arrivals to Beijing and were probably from fairly meager backgrounds, sort of aspiring to become middle class. So they were interested in just getting their cooking certificate and finding a place to work at. So that's basically the background on how I started there. And then I got my cooking degree, just like everybody else there. My Chinese improved dramatically. I found an amazing cooking mentor, Chairman Wang, who I still see quite often. In fact, I'll see her today later on at the courtyard. And she taught me she just started with jiaozi and taught me how to make jiaozi. And then we went on to stir fries and, moon cakes and, all kinds of like Chinese pastries and dim sum and that kind of thing. And then I became, I went and interned for in a noodle shop with Chef Zhang, who is our executive chef at Black Sesame Kitchen still to this day. And then, yes, he definitely knows you. He definitely remembers you. And then, funny connection with WildChina is that now we are very, very, we're partners with Matthew who started as a tour guide, I think, for you, right?
Yes.
About 20 years ago. And so Matthew is very intimately involved as a partner. And so after all my internship experiences, it was actually very hard to find an internship because nobody wanted a foreigner in their kitchen. Nobody could understand why, women especially were not very common back then, still are not in Chinese restaurants. It is a very unfriendly profession to women in general, I think, just from logistical issues and whatnot. But I, sort of went through these internships, worked in a fancy restaurant on the Bund in Shanghai. And then I came back to Beijing, and it was really, quite honestly, an accident that Black Sesame Kitchen happened, because I was really focused on my writing and just wanting to write about all these fun experiences and go on to another book. But friends kept on saying, well, this is so cool. Like, could you do a class for us? And so we would just go across town and go to people's homes and bring all the, the wok and all my spices and sauces and the chefs. And we just started having these cooking parties like around town. And then at that time, I still lived in the hutongs of Beijing. So it was very easy to find spaces back then. This is before the Olympics and all that in 2008. So we found a little space, and then that's where I started my classes. And actually the most successful element was not so much the cooking classes. We're still known as a cooking school, and we still do cooking classes, but we have this wine and dine communal dinner that May was just talking about, where everyone gets together. You book separately, but you all sit at a communal table, you watch the chef cook, and you get a 10-course meal, couple of wine pairings, and you just sit and talk and meet people from around the world, at least up until COVID. So, so that is kind of the background on Serve the People. I most recently read it in Chinese because it was translated in China and published here. So I think there was a little bit of difference in the translation. So I haven't actually read Serve the People in many years. So you guys might be more familiar with the material now, because it's amazing how much you forget as a writer if you don't read your material for a long time. But
no worry.
Yeah, but I also, after I did all those experiences, I wrote a second book called On the Noodle Road. And that's about my experiences learning how to make pasta and noodles in China, in Italy, and in between. I traveled the Silk Road from Beijing to Rome overland, and talked about the connections between all the noodle cultures, pasta cultures, where did noodles come from? And it's just a look into all the different cultures along the Silk Road through the women that I cook with. So I also do a fun noodle class, an online noodle class occasionally, where we start with the noodle making, and then I do a talk like this, and then we go back and actually roll out the noodles by hand. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you should take a moment and put your link to your cooking classes in the chat box. I'm sure people would be very interested in it.
I'm going to actually plug in my computer here just so that we don't run out of batteries. So excuse me while I...
Yeah, you can do that. Yes. But it's very interesting. What Jen was referring to was very similar to my experience. Like in China, the professional cooking is a zone that is not for women. However, home cooking is all women.
Yeah,
right?
Correct.
Except Shanghai. And so on many of WildChina journeys, we wanted to give people a sense of what it's like inside the kitchen, what sauces, what sort of things do you do? And so we actually getting into culinary schools was difficult. Black Sesame Kitchen was one of the few were pioneers in the field. And later on, we were able to get into, I think, Guilin, there's another one. And Chengdu, see how the 20 years has changed. In Chengdu, there is an actual professional culinary school where the chefs would wear these tall hats, and they teach chefs to go work in hotels. And they now offer one-day classes. I guess they realized.
Wonderful. Is that the one that Fuchsia was at?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, that is the one. Yeah, we did a Zoom session learning how to do mapo tofu. And nice. From then on, I can cook a dish at home now. Now, okay, I know you haven't read your book for a while, but I just read it. So I'm going to quote a paragraph here, which is the beginning. It says, in cooking class, I learned a startling array of things. Eating fish head will repair your brain cells. Spicy food is good for your complexion. And MSG is best thrown in a dish just before it comes off the wok. I read this and I was smiling because like when you open the book with stuff like this, to you, obviously, it's so different. And to me, it's so familiar because that's the way we grew up. And people would always say like, okay, your skin has some issues. Okay, eat some pork skin. My eyesight is no good. Eat some fish eyes. And that's how Chinese kids are. Nobody is surprised when they hear this. And 吃什么补什么. You eat. How do you translate that? Whatever you eat.
Whatever you want to restore, right? Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah. So share with us a few other such things. And since then, have you done some research? Is there any validity in such claims?
Obviously not, because, well, I think, they get a little carried away when they say, you should eat a fish eye because your eyes will improve if you have a fish eye. I think that's stretching it a little far. Well, I mean, I think that it does.
You are what you eat.
It does illustrate, just the fact that Chinese will eat every part of an animal, which is actually much more environmentally friendly, more efficient. I mean, if you're going to eat meat or fish, or you might as well use every part of it. And it's true that the cheeks are the best part of the fish. I don't go as far as the eyeball, but I really love fish cheeks. And the maw and all that kind of, fish head is delicious. Whether it really restores any part of you, I think is not exactly, is stretching a bit, but we now know in the West, of course, like you talk about, like how fat is good, 10, 20 years ago in the West, fat was bad, right? But now we say, actually you should eat, fat off of meat, or, if you're going to eat meat anyways. Of course, there's a whole sort of trend towards vegetarianism, because we need to sustain the planet and all that. And I'm actually trying to go in that direction as well, though it's very hard because I love meat. So I think I think a lot of those are good ways of sort of encouraging eating that should be done, right? That we do want to include every, part of the animal.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just laughing at the various comments. Even Helen lives in Indonesia, and she said the Huaqiao there, the overseas Chinese there, are taught the same thing. And Bruce is taught eating carrots gives you beautiful eyes. All these myths are just fantastic ways to see across the globe. We still connect, right? One of the things.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. I was going to say that Black Sesame kitchen, Black Sesame is good for your hair. So that's still why we must eat a lot of Black Sesame, May, since we both have hopefully fairly nice black hair.
Hopefully for another 10, 15 years. Is that why you named your kitchen Black Sesame Kitchen?
So no. Black Sesame was because we were on Heizhima Hutong. So Black Sesame Hutong. Black Sesame Lane in the right near Nanlu Gushang. So right near a very famous alleyway of Beijing. Yeah.
Right. Very nice. Okay, I'm going to show you my collection. This is my cleaver, and I cannot go anywhere without it. So I'm shipping one to Maine, where we go for summer. But in your book, you talked about in different regions around China, people prefer different shapes of knives. I honestly was a bit surprised. Do you have a few samples of different knives to share? Because I thought all Chinese cook with this.
Well, that's funny because you mentioned that right before the talk, and to be honest, I can't remember where I wrote that in the book. I do think there are some variations in the shape, but the general shape is what you have and what I showed earlier. I think maybe in the South, they probably have like slightly thinner type knives. But yeah, I think generally that cleaver is what you see pretty much everywhere. Yeah. And it might just be a matter of, if in further, like down South, of course, they're much more sort of Western focus, more sort of with Hong Kong and with the whole, sort of Western influence, there might be a little bit more of a thinner knife, but yeah, I couldn't actually recall.
Okay.
I know there's different, yeah,
because it's being a few
I think what you and I have is basically the standard. Yeah. So
this is all my life. This is all my dad had. One.
Just one knife, basically one knife. Yeah.
Right.
And and it does everything. My chef peels apples with it. It's an amazing thing to see.
Okay, that's a bit much. I do have a little fruit knife.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah.
I do cut garlic with this.
Yes, garlic is it's a fantastic smasher of garlic. Yes.
Right. Now, there's also another aspect of Chinese cooking versus how sort of Chinese culture that always has baffled me, right? You were talking about when you were learning cooking, there are various terminologies like ways of cutting, very specific: circle cut, rolling cut, slicing, and threading, shredding, or whatever. And two questions here. One is, do we have similar terminologies in Western cooking? And second question is more, what do you think is in the Chinese culture that they are we are a very specific nation. In fact, there are a lot of times, there's very specific ways of doing things, but yet we don't write recipes. When it comes to recipes, everything is like 差不多, means more or less. It's, even Hu Shi wrote an article about 差不多先生, right? It's like everything's like Chinese, more or less, it's okay.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. Well, I think Chinese food is a lot more forgiving in terms of measurements than Western cooking. And I think that, with baking, of course, you need to be very specific, but even for Western chefs, like let's say you're working in a very, you're a chef and going in every day and cooking, I doubt they're measuring because they know by instinct basically how much to put in.
That's true.
So I think that's very similar with Chinese chefs here, is that I think the other thing is also education levels here, right? Because your average chef in China is probably not super educated, and so they're not going to necessarily write anything or document everything down. This is something that actually is something that I work very hard on, actually, at our establishments. I'm actually, nowadays, I have to tell you, May, I'm not actually, running the show there, but I am, constantly, in as a consultant and pretty much as a volunteer these days there, helping out. But yeah, one of the things I really focus on with trying to, tell the chefs, we especially now, because funny enough, we're moving into Western food. We've got a new brunch menu. We have a full-fledged restaurant, and we're doing like Western bar food and kind of like a little bit of a fusion thing going on. Everything is written down. All our recipes are documented. Everything needs to be measured before it's put in, because it's food that's unfamiliar to them. Right. When it's Chinese, I think because they're just, they've been doing the same thing for, over 12 years now. They are good at it, but any new recipe that comes in is actually quite well documented on our end, and is actually one of the keys, of course. Any well-run restaurant will have a process like that. Of course, at homes and stuff, yes, this idea of 差不多 or not measuring. Yeah, I mean, everything I think is by instinct, and there's just not that whole culture of gadgets and measuring implements and things that we have in the West that probably only came into fashion in the last, I don't know, sometime in the 20th century, so.
Yeah. I was reflecting on it and thinking maybe there's also a way it reflects how the society has changed in Chinese society. Traditionally, like, I learned from my aunt, from my dad, by living together and watching them cook, right? So the cooking skills that get passed on from generation to generation. But in America, and most Chinese families stay together, generations together.
Yes.
But America is so like kids
diverse.
Right? So someone would be moving from Seattle to New York. And that's what happened to me when I was in Hong Kong. I had to call my dad and say, how do I use this garlic?
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're basically being shown how to do it in real time in the same space. But if you're moving, you probably, when you were in Hong Kong calling your dad, you probably had to write something down, right, to remember.
Yeah, he wrote this one sentence recipe for an entire stew, one line. And I go, Dad, I expect half a page.
Yeah.
It was quite funny. And then he's like, yeah, the phone call is too expensive. It's more expensive than the dish. Just hang up. Okay. Since now you're in Beijing, tell us how much it has changed. Particularly, you were talking about parts of the book that I loved was your description of the alleyways, of the difference between Shanghai and Beijing, of fine dining and street dining. How much has life changed in COVID time, or this tour of your life compared to before?
Mm-hmm.
Cooking scene.
I think some of the changes were, of course, pre-COVID. I mean, just the speed of industrialization in China, the speed of technology, and how that's changed people's lives. It's really hard to find a knife sharpener. It's almost impossible these days. Part of it is also my life has changed because I used to live in the hutongs, and the hutongs being the narrow alleyways of Beijing, and when I opened Black Sesame Kitchen, I was kind of, we were living this bohemian lifestyle. We didn't have children. I was just turning 30, I think, at that time. And now we've come back, and we're living, in Chaoyang district, and my children are here, and I go to the hutongs as kind of a novelty experience. And these were actually the type of people who came to Black Sesame, the type of person the kind of lifestyle that I'm living now, right? Because it was really cool to go into the back alleys and have these cool experiences. And they would show up with their drivers, and they would get dropped off, and they would get lost, and all this kind of stuff. And so actually, I'm much more. When I was, 10, 12 years ago, when I saw these people I was like, these are a really strange breed of people. Like, this is different for me. But now I've kind of become that person, that target clientele, I suppose. So I think, so much it's about, changing yourself, and about the environment having changed. And of course, China in general, Beijing in general has changed a lot. There's a huge movement in the back alleys to clean things up. Actually, as we are, just a recent thing is, a lot of people are actually getting, this has been waves and waves of this have happened over the years, being moved out into further areas. But now they're actually doing a whole other sweep in our neighborhood. And in fact, we are actually, we've moved a lot of our food and beverage operations to Chenmen Kitchen, which is the new restaurant. Because of all this, Chenmen Kitchen is located right near Chenmen. And I don't know if you're probably familiar with this because you know everything about Beijing, but there's a whole new sort of district just east of Chenmen that is developing as kind of a high-end sort of alleyway area. So we've relocated our food and beverage operations there, and our courtyard is staying for very, very private dinners, sort of invitation only type things, and cultural events, including our summer camp that we just finished running. So I think a lot of it is just, it's rarer and rarer to be able to find businesses and people who can live and operate in the hutongs. We're just a few hundred meters away from the Forbidden City, so that's very sensitive. With the Olympics coming up, there's kind of this tightening and relaxation depending on what the COVID numbers are like. Of course, Beijing is so much safer, and China is so much safer than everywhere else in the world. I wish everybody could come to Beijing to see what it's like. It just really is incredible. Kind of the measures that we've been under to keep us safe. Leaving China as an expat is very difficult these days. But the price is you pay that price, and what you do get is, kind of not having to worry about it when you're here. There's a huge inconvenience to life, of course, though. So COVID wise, but I'm getting a little bit, refocus me, May, try to, what in that interests you? Yeah.
The restaurant scene, I am seeing sort of the Chinese all just, they like to dine out. The cooking at home is shrinking, and all the wet markets that you were talking about are disappearing.
Yes.
It's probably very, very hard to find the Chef John's noodle kind of joints now, as you were talking about the cleaning up.
I would say those little mom and pop shops there's still many, many, many of those. Okay. So that's nice. But that hasn't changed. And, my favorite, there's a dish called jianbing, the breakfast food where it's a Chinese.
My favorite place is gone.
Oh yeah. So some of them are gone, but they're always going to pop up. So I still have, my, 5 in my neighborhood here, even in this fancy neighborhood. We still have that. We still have noodle shops, so that's fine. And you can get your liang pi, your cold, sesame noodles quite easily. But that hasn't changed. Yes, the shopping is more difficult, and so much of it has moved online. And it's just, quite frankly, it's just, I think in some ways it's really, it really is interesting because it has created this market for all of China, like all of these Southern things, because I'm Southern Chinese, all of these Southern ingredients that I wouldn't necessarily be able to find quite well, I can now on Taobao. Like you just, search for your Guangdong, sausages, or my lotus seed paste that I like for Mooncake Festival. And, these are things that just didn't exist here. So I think it really has created sort of this pan-Chinese sort of availability of ingredients, and also foreign ingredients too. You put in artichoke in English on Taobao and you can buy artichokes, it's incredible. So that access to ingredients has really changed because of that. Of course, the downside is you don't get those exchanges and happenstance occurrences that you get in the markets, that real sort of lively experience. There are some markets, of course, and I'm sure WildChina will take you to them if you come to Beijing, and
harder to find.
Yes, harder to find. But and then in terms of restaurants, of course, there's everything here, right? Michelin now does a whole guide to Beijing restaurants, and I'm trying to sort of make my way through the list, but quite honestly, a lot of them I can't afford.
Yeah, that's another thing, is food in China actually are surprisingly expensive now. You can find very cheap, but also very expensive ones. Yeah. Yes. There was one thing, since you hinted on this, your new F&B operation, you moved away from the hutongs, and you have partially serving Western drinks and bar food sort of thing. This goes back to my last conversation with the founder of the Temple Restaurant and Emma LeBund.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I spoke to them, they said something quite telling. They said, in fact, particularly the gentleman who runs the Temple Restaurant said, in China, we don't think about running like 100-year-old legacy restaurant or Michelin restaurant that will last forever. Like that goal carries no value in a way, because flavors and preferences go in and out of fashion so quickly in China that everyone's just like trying to catch the next style of eating, fashion flavor of eating, or the kind of cuisine. Do you agree with that? Is that partially why you've also dabbled with Western
yeah
food?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think there is this mentality, especially with younger people, that with this culture of what do you call it, like Daka, right, of like Dazhong and all this stuff, that they go to a restaurant, they do their pictures, they do their equivalent of Instagram moment, and then they're out. It's just all about, let's get this picture, let's say we've been here, let's put it on our social media, and let's move on to the next thing. So it's true. I think Ignace has a very good point that it's very hard to have loyalty. I think loyalty in guests is difficult. We're moving more towards a Western menu because, and I will be very frank about this, our Chinese food does not sell to Chinese. It's the whole experience, being able to sit with people from around the world, from people willing to strangers sitting next to each other, drinking wine as part of the meal. So that's already two strikes against us. And then we're serving very, very jiatang type, very home style dishes in this environment. And so that's, I still think our food is fabulous. And I think, we get amazing reviews all the time, even from Chinese. But I think the style of cuisine we do for the price point that we have had it at is not going to be a mass market hit in China. So we, and also we have a huge, even without COVID, even with COVID going on, our audience is expats. So now that we've opened this restaurant, we have a whole lot of foreigners coming in. They're eating very home style Chinese food. If you're an average person, a Chinese person walking down the street, and you see foreigners in a restaurant eating Chinese food, it's the equivalent of if you're in the States and you're having, you go to a Chinese restaurant and it's all foreigners, right? That looks weird. That looks really odd, right? Why, these people clearly don't know. They don't know what, they don't know about the food. That's why, so we are making the best of, the situation, and we are doing. And also, I have to say, this is the other thing, is what foreigners like, and May, I think you probably know this better than anybody else, is very different than what Chinese like in terms of Chinese food. And I think it really goes, there are some standards like, Kao Ya or, Peking duck and, flavor profiles that are similar, but what they're looking for in a restaurant is very different. So we, now that, I'm still here for another year and I have extensive, Western cooking background as well, we feel like we can stand out in a market of 10,000 restaurants by doing Western, or by doing some kind of fusion, but you cannot call it fusion in China. You cannot call it fusion in China. Chinese will not go to a fusion restaurant. So we're calling it straight up Western food, even though there are quite a few fusion elements. So the marketing also has to be different to a Chinese audience.
Mm-hmm.
And as anyone who has worked in this market knows, marketing to Chinese is very different than marketing to an international audience.
Yeah, and I think one thing we probably forgot to mention is that COVID probably forced the changing clientele, right?
Yes. I mean, we lost well over half of our, 50-60% of our business because of COVID, because most of our, at least half were international business travelers, high-end travelers. WildChina, you still send people occasionally to us. In fact, one of my very good friends, Brantley Turner from Shanghai, came on a trip with your people.
That's great.
Yeah. So, but so we just have to adapt, and so that's what the last year and a half has been about for us. And we're really event focused. So we do all kinds of events for our community, and with other venues like the Bookworm having closed as well. This is a big community center that was not only just a staple of the expat community, but of a very loyal Chinese following as well. People are looking for, like, even this virtual platform, right? A community, a place where we can meet people that feels like home, that feels comfortable. And so we have completely changed our business model in the last year and a half because of this.
Yeah, everyone. And I think I actually salute you for, the entrepreneurship, the leadership to make changes and to adapt so that your staff, can still be there. Many businesses have folded. It's not an easy time.
But it's been very fun, and the chefs are learning all kinds of things, including the concept of brunch, which doesn't exist in China except for in Hong Kong with dim sum. But this is a whole new thing, and it's exciting. So we're
That's great. That's great. Okay, if anybody has a question, do put them in the Q&A or chat box. We'll try to get to a few. In the meantime, Jen, as you mentioned, you're going through the Michelin Guide one by one. Can you name 3? Well, please do also put the name of your new Qianmen establishment in the chat box as well. I'm sure.
Oh, sure, yeah. Qianmen Kitchen.
Qianmen Kitchen. I can type it.
Yeah.
But give us 3 top Chinese restaurants in Beijing that you like. Aside from yours.
Somebody asked me this the other day. Well, I would say our friend Ignace, the Temple Restaurant Beijing, and also his sort of mass market brand Hulu is very good. That's
what is that one called again? Is it Hulu?
Hulu,
yeah. like the video streaming service, right?
Yeah, yes, like the video streaming service. And then let's see. For Chinese, I still love Da Dong Duck. That's still one of my favorites. Xianlaoman, Xianlaoman. They do Beijing Thai and dumplings in the hutongs. Xianlaoman. So those are 3. Yeah. And then I'll say the orchard out in the suburbs, because that's where my husband proposed to me.
Suburbs, beautiful. I actually really enjoy, I think, these are probably on the list of the Michelin restaurants. There's the Temple restaurant at the basement of the opposite house. I quite enjoy their duck, and also the Country Kitchen at the Rosewood Hotel.
Country Kitchen. Yep.
They sort of like take these country dishes, particularly your specialty noodles, and make them sort of served in a very beautiful place where it's proper to entertain even. Right? Okay. 2 questions here from Margaret. Is it possible to get the book in China? She's in Shanghai.
In fact, it is. If you just let's see, email me. I will send you a signed copy. In fact, so our people can take care of that. So just send me an email at jenlinliu@gmail.com. That's
jenlinliu@gmail.com. Let me see if I got all the spelling correct. I think that's it. Okay, well, thank you. That's wonderful. Wonderful benefits to our participants. Do come back to our book events, and we hope to read more. The other question is, may I ask, where in Chaoyang District do you live now?
I live not far from Chaoyang Park, so just a little bit, let's see, west of Chaoyang Park.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I would always prefer to live in the hutongs, but with children, you know how it is, May. I mean, now you're reaching the end of that, I guess, with your son going to college. So,
two more.
Maybe 2 more to go, but yeah, you're closer to it than I am. So at some point, if I am back in Beijing, without children, I will definitely be in the hutongs.
Go to the hutong. Yeah, so lovely. Okay, this Honglingjing Gongyuan. Oh, so this person was asking whether it is Honglingjing Gongyuan near that area.
Oh, yeah, not too far. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. Is the food culture in Beijing very different from in other parts of China? We lived in Shanghai, and there definitely were Chinese places that were geared to Chinese clients. And Lao Beijing was a legacy place. So is the Beijing food culture very different?
Yeah, I think every culture is, every place is different. I just spent a week in Guizhou, and the food was completely, you couldn't get northern food in Guizhou. We had to eat, the breakfast was amazing. We had these beautiful rice noodles with beef soup every morning in Guizhou, and they have the sour pot fish and all these things. But you talk to my chefs who are from the north, they've never had dim sum. They think that's foreign food. So yes, absolutely. There's one of the Michelin starred restaurants in Beijing is a Shanghai restaurant. And I looked at the menu and all that. And I said, no, I'm not going to go there because I could go to Shanghai and get something better.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I'm afraid we have to wrap today's conversation short. Sure. But yeah, if anyone do go to Beijing after COVID, make sure you visit the Black Sesame Kitchen for that communal experience.
Yes. And please, I've got a website, jenlinliu.com. In the last year, I took a break from doing public online cooking classes, but I will be starting that very soon. So feel free to go on there and sign up for a newsletter. And I hope to see you guys in Beijing at some point, including May.
Yes, we hope so. Hope to see everybody. Do sign up for JenLinLiu.com. And if you can't go right now, take some online sessions, right? Okay, a little bit introduction for our next event. We will be reading House of Kwa, KWA. It's a new release from May this year and written by an Australian journalist and a positive mindset coach called Mimi Kwa. So if you have time, come back and join us. Jen, thank you again. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you enjoying the remaining days of the summer and a new beginning in the fall.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you,
luck
May.
with the restaurant.
Keep in touch.
Thank you, Jen.
All right.
Okay, take care. Bye.